Hi everyone, and welcome to May's Nomensa webinar. Today's session is hosted by our Principal Content Designer, Stephen Shukor, titled The Content First Approach, How to Get a Competitive Edge Through Great UX. In this webinar, Stephen will share how planning your content upfront will make it easier to find, use, and share on any device and platform, and break down the content first approach and its benefits to businesses and design teams. Stephen will cover subject modeling, structured content, and connected content. As always, please say hello and join in with the discussion in the chat. Make sure you switched your chat settings to panelists and attendees so everyone can see your messages, and do let us know if there are any issues with the stream. As always, please ask lots of questions using the Q&A function. I'll be asking these to Stephen at the end, and I'll try to get through as many as I can. And we will be sharing the recording as soon as we can after the session. We are using auto-generated closed captions. Whilst these are quite accurate, it does sometimes get a few words a bit muddled. So when we make this session publicly available on our YouTube channel, we'll make sure those are 100% accurate, but please do bear with us on that. So yeah, without further ado, I will hand over to Stephen to kick things off.
Thank you, Henry. Hello. Nice to see so many of you joining us today from the UK and beyond. I think the future of content is in safe hands. So thanks for tuning in. This is a webinar about taking a content-first approach to designing digital products and services. Here's what you'll learn today. I want to show you the value of starting with content and hopefully inspire you to look at design projects differently. I'll speak for about 25 minutes, which should leave us with plenty of time for questions. But allow me to start with a quick story. The W.E.B. Du Bois Library in Massachusetts was at one time the tallest university in the world, towering at 90 meters. But soon after its opening in 1974, it had to close after bits of brick started falling down. One theory is that the architect had not factored in the weight of the library books. 250,000 books were removed from the building, and access was reduced for several years while repairs were carried out. This story perfectly captures my main message today. Plan your content, then design. Don't rush ahead with designing until you have a good idea of what you're designing for. Your content choices will affect many of your design decisions. It's much better to make those choices early before you start building. A bit about me. I spent 20 years in content, first as a journalist for the likes of the Sunday Times and the BBC News website, where I reported on everything from gun crime to state-sponsored assassinations. And 12 years as a content designer working on the NHS website, where I designed the NHS's first online weight loss plan. But before I go too deep inside the content wonderland, what do I mean by content? Content is more than just words. It's images, videos, online forms, chatbots, even microcopy. Content is the most important thing on your website or app. It's what people are looking for. So what is the content first approach? As the name suggests, it's about starting with content. It's about planning the content before designing a single pixel. I'm not saying content is more important than visual design. My point is that starting with content helps improve design. I like to compare it to building a house. You wouldn't build a house without a floor plan. Before you start laying the bricks, you want to know things like, where's the kitchen? Where's the bathroom? How big are they? And so on. You need to know these things before you start. If your kitchen is too small, you may have trouble opening the door to your fridge. How many projects have you been involved in where content was an afterthought? I was recently involved in a project to design a tool to help UK businesses export. The design team had created a set of very attractive page templates, but midway through the project, the leadership team decided they wanted the tool to be an e-learning resource. So the tool needed stronger storytelling, new content components like tooltips, and features like quizzes. The templates had to be redesigned and content had to be rewritten. But this decision on content should have been taken at the start of the project. But rather than make that decision up front, they kick the content can down the road. And the longer you do that, the more expensive it becomes to rectify things. It wastes time and money, and it's not great for team morale. It's one of the pitfalls of not starting with content. So why start with content? Well, content is how you connect with your audience. But the web is a crowded space. To stand out, you need to create content people are looking for. You can no longer leave content to chance. That's how you get a competitive edge. For example, at Nomensa, we use a content-first approach to redesign the Met Office website. We started with research, getting real geeky with weather data. We designed a content model based on 7 user personas. And we used the content model to create a new information architecture to make content easier to find, and a new tagging system to connect the weather forecast with relevant content. This means that if storms are in the forecast, the website will put through content like driving in severe weather. Now, this content-first approach contributed to a 39% increase in users, up from 3.7 million to 5.2 million. So how do we do content first? There are different approaches. The way we do it at Nomensa is to plan content so that it is ready to be served on different devices. This includes smartwatches, chatbots, digital voice assistants, and even interfaces that have yet to be invented. The idea is to get the right information to the right people on the right device. We do this by separating content from presentation. This means content is not tied to a specific template for a specific device. This gives content much more flexibility. Here's an example of how it was done at the NHS website. Take the chickenpox topic. We wrote a single version of the topic in the content management system. Then it was up to designers to decide how this text will appear on different devices, such as the NHS app, the Google Knowledge Panel, which appears on the right-hand side of search result pages, and digital voice assistants like Alexa. So separating content from presentation makes your content work harder because you're making it available in more places. It also means when you want to redesign your service, you don't have to touch the content. You can just focus on visual design, saving time and money. So to make your content flexible, you need to break it down into small chunks. Think of these content chunks as Lego bricks. Behind each chunk is some data that helps machines like search engines make sense of your content. Is it a video? Is it an FAQ? Is it a medical web page or a news article? This code is known as metadata. With content chunks, you are free to assemble your content any way you want. The old way of doing things was to create unstructured content. Simply put, content was created in a rigid template designed for a specific device, say a desktop computer. It meant you couldn't serve up little bits of information to devices like Alexa. But with structured content and its content chunks, you can set your content free. Take the chickenpox page I mentioned earlier. The content has been broken into chunks. There's a chunk for symptoms, a chunk for treatments, a chunk for causes, etc. Let's say you're looking up causes of chickenpox on your smartwatch. Instead of being served the whole chickenpox topic on your small screen, you just get the causes section. You get the right information on the right device. It makes for a much better user experience. And a content-first approach allows you to do this. So here are the stages of the content design process with a content-first approach. It starts with researching your subject to understand the ins and outs of the topic you're designing for. What are your business objectives? What are users looking for? And you use that research to create a domain model. It's like a map of the subject. Then you use the domain model to create a content model. This in turn is a map of the types of content you'll need. Once you've done all of that, then you can start designing. Remember the floor plan. Start building once you know what content you're designing for. Now let's look at this in a little bit more detail. So the process starts with research. What's the subject of your service? Let's say, take Rightmove. The subject is property. With IMDb, it's movies. Spotify, it's music. Spend time researching and understanding the broader subject beyond the focus of your service. And this will help you understand how to position your service. For example, Rightmove and say Savills estate agents are both in the property business, but their focus is different. Research will also help you work out what people are interested in and the language they use. You should involve subject matter experts and users in your research. I find a really useful way of getting everyone involved is to map it all out on a whiteboard. And that's how you create a domain model. So here's an example of a domain model for a UX conference. So if you were attending a UX conference, and Nomensa hosts several every year, these are the things you may be interested in: a session, the venue, the speaker. The domain model simply shows the things people are interested in and how these things relate to each other. So if you're looking up a session, for example, you may also be interested in the session format. Is it a lightning talk? Is it a panel? Is it a walking talk? Or you may be interested in the speaker. The domain model is not a map of a website. It's a map of a subject, in this case, a conference. Creating a domain model is not technical. It's actually quite creative. All you need are stickies, Sharpies, and some imagination. Now, why create a map? Well, it's great for team collaboration and seeing the big picture. Make it a team effort. Involve users, stakeholders, subject matter experts, the delivery team. That way, everyone feels included, everyone's contributed, it builds shared understanding, also helps to secure buy-in. Now, once you've created this stage, you're ready to start planning your content. So you take your domain model and translate it into a content model. So some of the things of interest that we saw here in the domain model are carried over into the content model. So here's a basic content model of the UX conference. It's a map of the types of content you'll need and how they connect. As you can see, the content model looks a lot like the domain model. Remember, we're not creating content, we're simply planning it. The content model is made up of content types, attributes, and connections. Now let's look at these one by one. A content type is a reusable container for similar information. You can think of it as a template. A content type could be a blog, a video, a picture gallery, a product page. The key word here is reusable container. Let's say you're selling fridges online. You'd reuse the product page for each fridge you're selling. That product page contains the information customers are interested in, broken down into chunks. In the case of a fridge, you'd have a chunk for a name, the brand, the image, the price, a chunk for the size, the energy rating, etc. All your fridge product pages would contain similar information. The point is, content types are key to creating consistent content. And you need to think about this information before you start designing. Let's look at some real examples. This is a product content type on Victoria Plumbing. I'm currently redecorating my bathroom, so I'm all clued up on where to find the best deals. In this example, it's a page displaying information about a shower tray. This content type can be used for baths, taps, sinks, to present product information in a consistent way. Here's a content type on Airbnb. This page is displaying information about a holiday rental property. This property content type can be used for different properties in different locations. Now, if you do go to Xenor, check out the Gunnard's Head pub. They do great lobster, so buttery. But I digress. Here's a recipe content type on BBC Food. Actually, there's a theme here. This is my go-to cinnamon bun recipe. The page features information about the recipe, including the description, the image, the chef's name and photo, and ingredients. In content modeling, these features are called attributes. So content types have attributes. It's the stuff people are looking for within that content type. Take the shower page. It has an image, a size, a price, a hefty one at that. These are attributes. Back to Airbnb, the holiday rentals have bedrooms, beds, and bathrooms. I've circled them here in blue. They have a host. If you were looking for a rental, being in the sector you're in, you may insist on having Wi-Fi in your holiday rental. I know I couldn't live without it. All these features are attributes. The attributes of this used car include mileage, color, number of seats. They can all be modified depending on the car. Remember the content chunks I mentioned earlier? Attributes are your content chunks. Once you have your content chunks, you can choose when, where, and how to display them. Here on BBC Food, the cinnamon porridge recipe is displayed in 3 different ways. On the left here, you have the porridge recipe. I've circled a few attributes. In the middle, on the cinnamon recipes index, you just see the porridge recipes image, recipe name, the chef's name, notice no photo this time, and a description. While on the right, on the pear recipes index, you only see the porridge recipes image, recipe name, and the chef's name. What you're looking at is flexible content in action. Now, how do you make content flexible? Well, most of the magic happens under the bonnet using code. Here's an accommodation website we designed for UCAS, the University Admission Service. On the left, you can see the attributes listed in the CMS, the content management system where content is created. I've circled beds, bathrooms, and a short description of the accommodation. And on the right, you can see how these attributes appear on the live page. Now, let's look at how content types and attributes are connected in the content model. We want to make connections that make sense to people so that content is findable and browsable. There are many ways of connecting content. You can use inline links like they do on Wikipedia. You can use content collections like you saw with the cinnamon recipes on BBC Food. There's navigation, there's search using controlled vocabularies, and metadata, which I mentioned earlier. With the content first approach, these connections are considered before you start designing. And when you have your content chunks, you have the freedom to connect your content in many ways. The cinnamon ingredient on the left is linked to a cinnamon recipes index page, listing all recipes with cinnamon. I browse the list. A mouth-watering chipotle pinto bean stew grabs my attention. It's showing some attributes from the recipe content type and a link. The link takes me to the chipotle recipe page. Connected content has helped me discover a new recipe. By breaking content into chunks and making all sorts of connections between these chunks, you make content more findable and browsable. Connected content also makes content easier to update. Take the UCAS accommodation website. If the price of the room changes, I only need to update the price attribute once. I just update it in the main accommodation page on the right, and everywhere the page appears, Everywhere the price appears is automatically updated, such as these accommodation cards on the left. So there you have it. We've looked at content types, attributes, and how to connect them. It all comes together in the content model, which is at the heart of the content-first approach. Here's a more detailed version of the UX conference model, content model, which with its content types, attributes, and connections. The content model is your floor plan. Now you can start building. This webinar has been about how to take a content-first approach. It's about planning the content first so you can create a better user experience. You start with researching your subject and creating a map of that subject, the domain model. You use your domain model to create a content model with content types and attributes. Finally, you work out how these content types and attributes should connect with each other. Equipped with your content model, you can start designing your service. And with a content-first approach, everyone benefits. Stakeholders, you've consulted them as subject matter experts. You've involved them from the start, helped with buy-in. Teams, content designers know what type of content they need to create. Designers know what structure and language to use for their user interfaces. Developers can use the content model to design the CMS and build the database. For users, we're creating content they want, and it's connected in a way that makes it easier to find. And businesses, well, content works harder. With structured content, you can create once and publish everywhere to any device and platform. Content chunks make your brand, product, service more findable, browsable, and shareable. What's there not to love? The content model and its reusable content containers mean your website or app can grow without becoming a mess. And starting with content may help you avoid some of the problems that plague the W.B. Du Bois library. The library fully reopened in 1985 after several years of restricted access and $5 million of renovation work. If only they had started with content. If you want to find out more about the content-first approach, read this book. It walks you through the content design, the content-first design process in a practical and very engaging way. Thanks for listening. And I'll be ready for some questions, Henry.
Awesome, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, loads of really, really useful information in there. Yeah, for everyone watching, please submit your questions using the Q&A function just at the bottom of your Zoom window. But yeah, Stephen, oftentimes, we don't have the luxury of starting from scratch. How would you advise taking a content-first approach with an existing website?
Well, my advice would be to start small. It's very true that you don't have a blank canvas to start with very often. I would suggest taking advantage of the redesign of a section of the service, of your service. So, and if it involves content, seize the opportunity to start it with planning your content first. So, for example, whether you're in the public or private sector, you might be redesigning an online application form or turning PDFs into HTML or improving your help and support section. Start with content, give it a go. Try to go through the different stages of the content first approach I described. You don't have to follow it to the letter, adapt it to conditions on the ground. When I did structured content at the NHS website, we started with the Health A to Z section. And we could see once we went live with that there was demand from third parties like charities who wanted to consume this content in chunks. So say for example, the brain, I think it was the Brain Trust charity. They just wanted information about NHS treatments. So they didn't want the whole brain tumor topic. They just wanted that small chunk of information on on NHS treatments. And the senior leadership team felt confident that we had produced something that had there was demand for it, and that gave them the confidence to roll it out to other sections of the NHS website, including the medicines section and the healthy living section. So yeah, I'd start small, test, measure, and build confidence, and then you can grow that way.
Awesome, thanks, Stephen. So we've got a question here from Dan. Dan asks, what tools would you recommend for mapping the content ecosystem and creating a content model?
Well, it doesn't have to be very technical. You can do it with Post-it notes, Sharpies, and yeah, a bit of creativity. If you are face-to-face, you can use be around a table and take turns in going up to a whiteboard and sticking things up and moving things around and chucking things in the bin and just kind of flushing out complexity together. And if you're remote, well, you can use digital whiteboards like Miro, which we use a lot at Nomensa, or Mural as well. So yeah, those are two which work well. But the key thing is to be able to visualize it. And that encourages the collaboration.
Brilliant, thank you. So next question we have asks, how does this approach compare to designing a template, for example?
How does it compare to designing a template? Well, it should come before you design your templates. You create the content first without any design elements, and then you create separately your templates for the specific device you want to present that information. So in terms of the stages of the design, you would have content first, and then you start creating your templates for different devices. So a template for your app, a template for your web, a template for Alexa, etc. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Yes, next question from Alex. Alex asks, how often do you run your research sprints?
So if we were, typically if we're in an alpha phase, we would do a 2 week, so we'd work in 2 week sprints, and we'd be developing a prototype over maybe 8 to 10 weeks. And during each sprint, we would have a round of testing, and we'd get feedback from that usability testing, so testing with users, and we'd feed that into the next sprint, and so on and so forth until we reach the end of the alpha, and then we decide whether we've got something that is viable that we want to take into a beta.
Brilliant, thank you, Stephen. So we've got one more question here from oh no, two more. One more just popped up. Sorry. This next question is from Chun San Yong. They ask, thanks. They say, thanks so much for the great presentation, Stephen. Do you have any advice on how to test content models?
Yes. So as I said, a content model is a team effort. So you should definitely test it with first with the design team, and then with your subject matter experts and stakeholders, and more crucially with your users. So you can do you can test it via things like tree testing, but also you could just test different journeys of the content model using tree testing. So yes, I would definitely recommend testing it with different groups.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've got a similar question there from Neil, so hopefully that answers your question as well, Neil. So next question, Stephen, do you have any tips on connecting or including the content model in a design system?
I'd have to, that's quite broad. I would probably need a bit more detail.
Cool. Well, I mean, anyone that wants to get in touch with Stephen kind of afterwards, you are on Twitter and LinkedIn, aren't you, Stephen? So people can kind of come back to you and ask questions there. I'm sure you'd be more than happy to.
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah. If you send me a bit more context, then I can give you a more satisfying answer, I think.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, we have one more question from Thomas, who asks, you mentioned that the content model informs information architecture and sitemap. Would you ever do it the other way around and let the sitemap inform your model?
No, I wouldn't. The sitemap is often something that you would design after, once you've actually designed your information architecture. So you've already thought of a certain logic. So going from a sitemap back to the content model would feel like you're going in a reverse order. So it would be more logical to start with thinking about starting with the content model, then building your information architecture, and then building your sitemap.
Cool, thank you very much. So I think that's all the questions for today. Stephen, thank you so much for a great presentation. Loads of super useful information in there. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Please do join us for our next webinar, hosted by accessibility consultant here at Nomensa, Joel Strohmeyer, on the commercial impact of accessibility. This is on the 8th of June at 2 p.m. UK time. Sign-ups are open now. We'll tweet out a link shortly. And yeah, we also have Virtually, which is our brand new virtual accessibility conference taking place on the 24th, 25th and 26th of May. There are still places left, so please do sign up for that, and that is completely free. Again, thank you, Stephen. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you next month. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All the best.